Good evening, everybody. So now time for our truth and taxation meeting. So
okay,
go ahead.
I'll take over. So each year the county is required to hold a public hearing and ask for public comment on the budget and taxation process. We just have a few slides and then we can open it up for public comment or questions.
Could you introduce yourself?
Oh yeah, I'm Andrea Bain, Assistant to the County Administrator.
Brian Anderson, Finance Director, Auditor, Treasurer for Goodhue County.
Thank you.
And we're just gonna have Lucas come up here as well. He did the capital plan this year, so if there's any specific questions to the capital plan. Lucas Dowling, Finance Controller.
Okay, so first of all, we're going to talk about the budget development timeline. The whole process actually starts in January. Market values are determined. In March, property tax statements are mailed out. August through November, departments are looking at every single line item within their budget, line by line. Various meetings occur between departments as well as with the county board. We hold budget workshops. In September, the board approves the preliminary levy. November, the property tax notices are mailed out based on that preliminary levy approved in September. And then December, we hold the public meeting, which is tonight, and the board will be asked to approve the final budget at the last board meeting in December. That's December 20th. And Brian's going to talk about the
Yep, so that was the bulleted version, and here it is, kind of a timeline layout. And so you can see the yellow, December 8th is where we are today, obviously. And with that, as Andrew was saying, the values were determined as per state law, Department of Revenue, on January 2nd of this year. So for 2023 values, they were already determined on January 2nd. We went through that whole local board of appeal and equalization process up through June 14th. We had to approve it. Again, that's through the Department of Revenue, and then we have to submit that to the Department of Revenue at that time. However, just to make the public aware, in order to determine the values for 2023, they had to use sales going back to 2020 from October 1st through 2021, September 30th. So the sales in the market, as we all know and heard, everybody was paying over asking price and multiple bids and so on and so forth. That is what we are required by law to use to determine the valuation of people's houses. And again, we're not here to talk about the valuation, but this is how these two come together. So moving on a little bit through the timeline, as Andrea had pointed out, in 2020, then we started having discussions regarding the budget. The amount of levy was set as per what's needed to operate county functions. TNTs were mailed out that most people got, and we received several phone calls regarding that, because now we take the tax rate, multiply it times the net tax capacity of the individual or the parcel, and they do that with the major jurisdictions, that being the school district, the city, and the county. And then there's some other smaller ones in there. It could be watershed and other things like that as well. And then with that, you'll see in 2023, obviously, as it is every year, you get the tax. You can pay for your first half on May 15th and the second half on October 15th for residential ag. Usually it does lag in November for that. So that is kind of and how that works and how the two come together.
Okay, so going back to that proposed preliminary levy that the board approved in September, the amount was $43,055,665. Now, since then, we, like I said, we looked at the line items regularly. We've been through open enrollment with our staff. So things have changed. The new proposed final levy is at $42,876,45, so down slightly from September. When we look at the overall budget, about 47% goes to pay for personnel costs. That's our staffing, salaries and benefits. 27% goes to pay for services and charges. 9% goes to public assistance. 6% goes to capital. 3% goes to supplies and materials, future fund balance and transfers and miscellaneous other expenses, and 2% goes to debt. When we focus on the levy, those tax dollars collected, we break it down by fund. 53% of those dollars collected goes to pay for departments within the general fund, such as our public safety, so our sheriff's department, the county attorney's office, probation, all of our land offices, taxpayer services, our vet's office, and overall administration. 20% goes to health and human services, 15% goes to public works, 6% goes to capital, 5% goes to debt, 1% to waste management, and less than 1% to economic development.
Excuse me. And moving on to the capital plan, as you can see on the slide, there is some variation in the total expenditures that have been budgeted over the next 5 years. Generally, we try to keep these flat year over year. Excuse me, but however, this year, as we know, for 2023, we're going to have some rather large expenditures with the LEC's boiler replacement project, which is approximately $787,000, as well as some HVAC work here for the government center as well. So that's why there's the larger dollar amount, the 4.2 million budgeted for 2023, and then you can see it drops down to 2024, and then kind of evens out for 25 through 27. It comes back up a little bit at the end. Sources of the revenue, it comes through various sources, the operating levy, grants from the state and federal governments, some reserve fund balance, and then the major line item for 2023 and 2024, there's the items that were going to be used to pay for those large expenditures. I mentioned the 1.2 million in 2023 and 225,000 in 2024, and then obviously the levy below that. And then we have that same information in a line graph just to really accentuate the changes in time. So as I said, you know, in 2023, that total capital expenditure line item is quite a bit higher than the total levy. And that is simply due to the fact that we're going to use American Rescue Plan dollars to pay for those two large expenditures, the boiler and that HVAC work as well. Then in 2024, the total capital expenditures decrease, but the levy goes up. That's also a function of not using that ARPA money, as well as there were certain assets that were pushed out from 2023 to 2024 to make the capital budget work, as well as just general inflation. There's been inflation in prices of basically everything. So those prices are going up.
And as you can see on the next chart too, where we are, so the proposed tax rate, and this is really what gets multiplied by the property's net tax capacity, has actually gone down 3.48%. So in 2022, currently it is at 47.18%, and it's projected to go down to 43.7%. And again, that's going to be the decrease of 3.48%, largely due to the amount of growth that the county has had, I guess. So that's all taken into account on how that rate is computed right there. And then if we were to take a look at, so similar property from 22 to 23, and you were to go through that exercise, and I just had gone through that with some people too. So you start out, say, with the 2023, $246,800. If that's the estimated market, and that's the median value of a residential house here in Goodhue County. And then you apply the market value exclusion, and that's the state's formula that hasn't changed for a number of years. So the higher your house is valued at, the less you actually get. Some people come in and they say, well, gee, my value went up, but my exclusion went down. Well, that's the way it's designed to do, up to the point of $413,800. Then you pretty much fall off and you don't get anything after that. So with that, and then you get your taxable market value, as you can see, so that reduces it down to $231,772 times your residential tax rate. And this is the same throughout the whole state. This is, again, administered by the Department of Revenue. So all counties follow this process. So you can't just go to another county and act like you're gonna, get some type of great savings. So that's 1%. So when you multiply that out, obviously it's $2,318. And then the local tax rate that I just went over, 43.69%. So if you compare that tax rate, our current one, to the proposed for 2023, the individual, if their house did not increase or decrease in value, would be potentially saving next year $80.75. And here it is, the history again showing. You can see that line in there going down, obviously. And currently for 2022, part of the reason why it actually did go up was because we received some late information about some utility properties that the state worked with. Don't want to let that go quite yet. So anyways, that's why we got that information late before the truth and taxation went out. So that's the increase. Otherwise, it would have been a flat tax rate going across. But instead, now for 2023, we're going to end up with a decrease in the tax rate there of 43.7%.
Just a question, have we got all of the utilities, railroad, everything is completely?
Yeah, so the state has really done a much better job. This past year, we ended up getting that at the beginning of September, where last year we got it at the beginning of October before the truth and taxation. Or before, I should say, the preliminary. Yes, before the preliminary and stuff too. So they've done a much better job at that. So yes, everything is entered and calculated. And I do have to say too, if I can, just a blanket statement, the county is in excellent finance position. I think you probably would agree, listening to the last couple audits that we've had in the last few years. And if you look at our fund balances that we've had for compensated absences, 27th payroll, building contingency funds and stuff like that too, we're doing very well in that area. So I do applaud and thank the board for putting money away for issues like Lucas has described too. When you have a $700,000 boiler that comes up out of the blue and kind of dies on us too, we have to come up with the money to pay for things like that. So that's why we do have contingency funds set aside for that. So with that, I think we can stand for any questions.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
When they had that reduction in the utilities tax rate, how often does that happen? I mean, is that, and the state sets that?
The state sets that. So what it is, it's for, like, we have the new plant and stuff. So it's for the larger utilities like that. So the state sets those valuations just because they're unique and stuff. So what, like Excel, you know, there's at least 3 other utilities that we have to go through for that too. But what they do is they'll appeal and then they'll talk, negotiate, and they basically come back with, a lot of times it's a reduced price. So they might put new equipment in, and there's things that the state takes into account. So it might go up initially, but then it comes down slightly after that too, and then they give us that valuation after. And again, it was later. Now it's in a timely manner that we can actually do something with and make informed decisions based on that information.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, quite frankly, I mean, the state assesses all transmission lines,
Right.
all railroads, all utilities, and you know that goes down to the Excel station that's in some town.
Mm-hmm.
It goes all the way down to there. So there's a lot of valuation that totally happens from the state.
Right.
Even though we say we assess properties, quite frankly, the state tells us you're going to assess properties, and if we don't agree with you, you're going to move them to what we want them moved to. And they do that. On whole towns, they've done that, where they said, no, we think your valuations are a little low. You got to raise them 2, 3, 4%.
Right.
Because they're always watching what we do and changing. I think one of the challenging things right now is you have the value of homes because of what people are willing to pay keeps increasing, and it has increased very rapidly. And ag land has increased some, but for the most part, business property hasn't changed as much.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens when one sector, the residential sector, keeps rising and these don't, there's a little bit of a tax shift because this valuation supports this, whereas the business and the ag is still over here. Ag has come up some. What happened during the housing market crash was residential values went down here, business and ag stayed where they were. They picked up a bigger percentage of the tax burden Now valuation of houses have gone the other way a little bit, and that shifted a little bit. So it's a little more difficult
Mhm.
for homeowners who aren't selling their house to stomach that increase. It's a complicated, very complicated process that we go through with the state and locally.
Right.
Do the utility companies negotiate every year, so they go through this every single year?
Yeah, they've gotten to the point where they do it every year.
With this last year too, with it going down
Yes.
dramatically.
Not only the utility companies, the large box stores are challenging the valuations down to even some banks and even some grocery stores that have challenged the valuations.
Daycares.
And there's different ways to do assessments based on sales versus to some degree versus just property. So they're always challenging us, and we're always.
Yeah, it is amazing too. So when you take a look at, say, a large retail, working with the assessors and appraisers and taking a look at it, they really have everything down to the square foot of, here's your covered building, and here's storage, and here's maybe your greenhouse in the summertime, and here's, a shed and parking lot. I mean, they have everything broken down, and they're trying to, so they do that with everybody and giving them the benefit, so they're not being charged for some heated roof area when it's really just a parking lot. So they don't just say, oh, you own this much property and your footprint is this big. They break that footprint down considerably. And
Well, as an example, I mean, the building where TJ Maxx is now, but I mean, it was empty for quite a few
Mhm.
years, so obviously the tax has to be relatively low if it's empty, right? Compared to,
It affects it,
all right,
but you can't say, you can't say that it's not worth what retail space is worth, because it could be retail.
so
I
there's,
mean, you can't adjust everything. Well, maybe I should just shut up. Maybe I should, but
Probably focus on the budget.
yeah, valuations are very different, just
All right.
end of discussion.
but that's where the dark store theory comes in.
Any other questions? Questions from anybody in the public? Concerns? That concludes your presentation.
If that concludes your questions, yeah.
Well, thank you.